we're going to be looking at UFC Fight Night Emmett versus Murphy. But before we do, let's recap what happened this past weekend. We started off the weekend with LFA 205 predictions. Version 2 of the model was able to put together enough data for 7 of the fights, and 5 of those were predicted correctly. We closed out the night with a profit of 2.3 units and are able to keep our perfect LFA streak alive. Moving on to Saturday's card, UFC Fight Night Mexico City, where we went 8 for 12 on predictions and unfortunately didn't cash either of our 2 underdog predictions on that card. Despite this, we were able to turn a healthy profit of 5.39 units, taking our overall profit for the weekend to just shy of 7.7 units. We close out the week again with a new all-time high, and we've got a lot of opportunity ahead of us. This week starts early with PFL on Thursday. Then we have one fight night on Friday, followed by UFC Fight Night Emmett versus Murphy on Saturday. Now that we're all caught up, let's jump into predictions for UFC Vegas 105. We'll be starting off the night in the women's strawweight division with a bout between Loma Lookboonmee and Estela Nunes. To be honest, I'm not sure what we're doing here. Or to be more specific, I'm not sure what Estela's doing here. She's 0-4 in the UFC, 4-fight losing streak, finished in 3 of them. Loma is 6-2 in the UFC on a 3-fight winning streak, most of those against top competition. I'm not really surprised that Loma is a minus 700 at the books, or that both versions of the model have her winning in excess of 70%. I've already placed a 10.5 unit wager on Loma to win this fight. The next fight also takes place at strawweight, this one between Talita Alencar and Vanessa Demopoulos. Talita is a little bit younger, but everything else seems to be against her in this fight. She's much less experienced, she's shorter, and she's given up about an inch in reach. But despite that, the books still have her as a true pick of minus 110 each way, and both versions of the model are giving her about a 60% chance to win. I will be wagering enough on Alencar to return 1.5 units with a win. On a side note, I just found out that Vanessa's given name is Crystal. Turns out she didn't even have to come up with a stripper name, her mom gave it to her. Our first men's fight of the night, we'll see Victor Henry take on Pedro Falco at bantamweight. Both versions of the model are very, very hot on Pedro here. I'm just not sure why. He's been away for a year. He's giving up height. He's giving up reach. The only advantage I see him having is in age, but I can't see that being this big of a factor even at 135 pounds. Either way, both versions of the model agree, so we'll be placing 1.5 units on Pedro in this fight. Next up, at welterweight, Daniel Frunza makes his UFC debut against Rhys McKee, and there is no better guy to make your debut against. Rhys McKee is 0-4 in the UFC. This is his second stint, where currently he's 0-2. Meanwhile, Frunza is on a 5-fight win streak, finishing all 5 of those fights. Despite my ignorant confidence, the models do not agree on this fight, and V1 thinks that Rhys McKee has a slight edge. We are betting V2, and at 58%, we'll be taking Daniel Frunza as a small favorite here for 1.6 units. The final women's fight on the card takes place at flyweight between Dione Barbosa and Diana Belbita. We've got another matchup here where the fighter seems to be giving up height, reach, and experience only to be a massive favorite. Barbosa is a minus 600 at the books here, while both versions of the model are just giving her the slightest edge. Any edge is an edge though, and the rules right now stipulate that we bet enough on Barbosa to return 1.5 units. It happens yet again. Daniel Santos has far less fights. He's giving up 1 inch in height, 2 inches in reach. This time he's been out for almost 2 years, yet he's the favorite at the books, and both versions of the model agree. As you should expect by now, I'll be doing what has shown to be profitable. I'll be betting enough on Daniel Santos to return 1.5 units with a win. The final fight on the prelims will be a flyweight bout between the undefeated newcomer Louis Gurul and O'Day Osborne. Louis will be a couple of inches shorter in this fight, but what really stands out is he's giving up an incredible 9 inches in reach. Their record makes it seem that they're both incredible finishers, but Gurul has only finished one of his last 5 bouts, while O'Day hasn't scored a finish in a fight since 2021. Although this may be a good opportunity for Louis, as O'Day has been knocked out twice and subbed twice in his last 5 fights alone. At the books, Gurul is a minus 225 favorite. V1 does lean very slightly his way at about 52%, while V2 is right in line with the books at 58% chance of victory. We'll be betting enough on Louis to return 1.5 units. The first of 2 middleweight bouts sees Robert Valentin take on Torres Finney. Valentin will be making his second walk to the octagon after losing the TUF 32 finale in his first outing. He'll have a pretty significant height advantage and a bit of a reach advantage as well. He'll be taking on Torres Finney, who will be making his UFC debut after an incredible 3 wins with 2 finishes on the Contender Series. Finney is still undefeated at 10-0, and despite giving up 6 inches in height, he will be favored at the books at minus 250. Both versions of the model also see him as a favorite here, V1 coming in at 54.5%, while V2 has him at a 61% chance of victory. We will be betting Torres Finney in this fight for enough to return 1.5 units. The other middleweight bout is between 2 veterans who have a combined 47 UFC fights, Gerald Meerschaert and Brad Tavares. Neither of these two have particularly impressive records in the UFC. Meerschaert is sitting at 15 wins and 10 losses, while Brad is just doing a slight bit worse at 12 wins and 10 losses. They're both a bit older at 37, the same height at 6'1", but Meerschaert does have a 3.5-inch reach advantage. Despite this, he is the underdog at the books at plus 215, but both versions of the model are giving him the edge here. We'll be taking Meerschaert for 1.5 units as an underdog. Next up, we've got the heavyweights, Kennedy and Nzechukwu taking on Martin Buday. Kennedy just recently moved up to heavyweight, and he has looked incredible. 2 fights in the division, 2 first-round knockouts. Those 2 opponents of Kennedy's also happen to be Martin's first 2 opponents in the UFC, also in the same order. Martin was able to secure a victory over both of them, although both of his went to a decision. At the books, Kennedy is a moderate minus 300 favorite, and given his recent history, I can see why. V2 of the model gives Buday a very slight advantage here, just shy of 52%, while V1 split him straight down the middle, 50-50, no decimal places to be found. Because V1 isn't clear on who it believes the winner will be, I could place a single unit bet on Buday here, but because he is the underdog and a 50-50 chance of winning does give him a good expected value, I decided to go ahead and place 1.5 units on Buday to win this fight. The feature bout on this card is a matchup between Cortavius Ramius and Chang Ho Lee. Ramius will be a slight bit older. He'll also be giving up 4 inches in height as well as 1 inch in reach. He's also coming off of a loss in his UFC debut. Lee is returning after winning Road to UFC, although that was nearly 10 months ago now. He is a minus 165 favorite at the books, and both versions of the model do agree here. Version 2 of the model has him at a 71% chance of victory, which is pretty high. We will be taking Lee in this matchup for enough to return 1.5 units. Our co-main event is a featherweight bout between Pat Sabatini and Joe Anderson Brito. These two have very similar UFC records, with Pat 6-2 in the promotion, while Joe Anderson is 5-2 in the promotion. Although they both have 2 losses, these losses look very different. Joe Anderson's end cap his career being his first fight in the promotion and his most recent, both of them being decision losses, while Sabatini has taken those 2 losses in his last 5 fights, both of them by first round KO. Our bookie and both of the models are all on the same page here. The book odds have Joe Anderson at -205, while V1 and V2 both favor him to win this fight. We'll be taking Joe Anderson Brito here for enough to return 1.5 units. We'll be sticking around at featherweight to close out this card with a fight between Josh Emmett and Lerone Murphy. Emmett is the much older fighter in this matchup at 40 years old. He'll be 7 years Murphy's senior. He is giving up 3 inches in height as well as 3.5 inches in reach, and he's been away from the sport for 476 days. Murphy is still undefeated in the sport. He did fight to a draw in his UFC debut, but has since strung together 7 straight victories. At -320, he's a moderate favorite at our books, but V2 sees Emmett with a very small edge here. V1 still leaning very heavy to Murphy at 69% chance of victory, so I'll be taking Lerone Murphy here for 3.2 units. Taking a look at the totals for the night, we've got 13 total wagers, 9 of them on favorites, 3 on underdogs, with 1 true pick'em coming in at -110 both ways. The model agrees on nearly every fight here, only leaving out 2 of the favorites. The 1 pick'em is also a confident pick. And again, for the second week in a row, every underdog was picked confidently by both models. Unfortunately, that didn't work out last week. Let's hope for something a little better this time. As expected, when a lot of favorites are picked, our total risk is quite high, coming in at 45.59% of our bankroll. This could increase our bankroll by as much as 23.6 units or a 51% ROI. I'm working on predictions for PFL and One Championship. Both cards also taking place this week. If you'd like to see all of the predictions for those, please check out the Patreon link in the description below. That's all I've got for you this week. Thanks for watching and good luck on all of your bets.